Hi guys, how you going?
Thanks, Senator, and you?
Yeah, good, thanks, good. Look, I was in Environment Committee last week and I asked a very simple question that's often told me by some of my opponents on the other side of the chamber, that renewables are cheaper. And I asked, well, if renewables are cheaper, why are energy prices always going up? And the reply was, because that's what the Cost Gen report says. And I found that quite interesting in the sense that one's real life prices and one's a model. So I'm just going to want to ask you some questions about the assumptions used in the Cost Gen report, if that's okay. So I note that the Cost Gen report assumes a capacity factor for wind farms at around 40%, and the actual capacity factor for the wind farm fleet for 2018, 2019 and 2020 years was 28%, 28% and 27%. Have you ever thought about changing the assumption in Cost Gen from 40% to 27% for wind capacity?
Yeah. So, Senator, so we can kick that off, and then I'll invite Mr. Graham to the table, who will be able to go through a lot more detail. But these sort of considerations come up each iteration of Gen Cost.
Yep.
As we look at performance in the system, and I guess work with the consulting group, which is industry players and governments, to work out what's the most appropriate assumptions going forward. So it's looked at on a regular basis, and it's looked at using the data for what's actually been happening out there in the NEM and how it's performed. So Mr. Graham might be able to go into a bit more detail that for you, but they're being constantly honed.
Sure.
Paul Graham, Chief Economist for the Energy Business Unit in the CSIRO. We use capacity factors in two different ways in the Gen Cost report. One is if we're doing system modelling, we use the half-hourly profiles that are published by AEMO to use in any sort of Australian electricity modelling, and they have that for different places all across Australia. But when we're producing what's called levelised cost of electricity data, we're not modelling the whole system, we're just modelling the delivered cost of energy from different technologies. There's lots of uncertain factors in that, like the capital cost or the fuel cost, the operating cost, and the capacity factor. And so what we do is provide a range. We provide a high range for the capacity factor and a low range. And that gives us like the cost ranges that we publish for energy from the different technologies. We've tended to be a little bit on the generous side around new technologies. We say they're probably about average or better. So, for example, the range that we use for black coal is 60 to 80%, but you can find historically black coal plants that might have only operated at 40%. Same for, say, wind. The best wind plant is 48% in the last 10 years. The average is generally about 33%. That's from the data that we have. But you'll find a wind plant that's maybe as low as 20%. So we tend to go from sort of the average level up to the best plant. That tends to be what we use for our range.
Okay. How do you estimate the number of kilometres of transmission lines, for example, that you need to install to get to 80% of the grid, get renewables to 80%, 82% of the grid by 2030? Have you got some sort of an estimate for that?
The Australian Electricity Market Operator publishes all the potential useful transmission projects that could be used if we wanted to connect up different renewable energy zones. You put all those projects into the model and then you ask the model to select which of these transmission projects is least cost to deliver a certain outcome, whether that's it depends what you're modelling. If you're modelling a renewable share or you're modelling an emission outcome, the model will choose the amount of transmission that is least cost to achieve that outcome.
Okay. Does the model take into account the cost of recycling renewables and cleaning them up?
There's no modelling that we do that includes the cost of recycling in the Gen Cost project.
Okay, thank you.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.